Chairman, I basically support the funding proposal. Speaking for the first time, I would like to have a discussion on the funding proposal. I think the proposed funding proposal really address the questions facing students and teachers, especially the immediate issues that we need to address now. So this funding proposal now has received widespread support within the community. But at the same time, I don't think we need to exaggerate the amount. You may hear the figure of 5 billion and 3.6 billion. That appears to be a very large amount. But if you place it in the context of the total budget every year, the proposed increase this time only means that you are just reversing the declining trend. Without the $3.6 billion of additional funding, our education expenditure would be down by 0.6%. With the $3.6 billion, basically the expenditure on education would remain stable or up, is only up 0.1%. Compared with other jurisdictions, expenditure on education only make up 3.5% of our GDP. Compared with the advanced economy, it's 4.8%. So there's still a big gap. So after we've approved the funding proposal, I emphasize that we need to continue to provide greater support for education and on a long-term basis as well. For this funding proposal, this has been discussed by the education panel already, and there are a few points which I think we need to follow up further. For the teaching establishment for primary, secondary schools and special ed schools, the increasing the teacher-to-class ratio of 0.1, it's an important development, but it's not enough to resolve the problem. To really resolve the problem of the excessive workload for the teachers, as a result of which is that we cannot provide quality education, I think that ratio should be increased to 0.3. I hope the government will steadily increase the teacher-to-class ratio. You don't need to increase it immediately but to 0.3. You have to consider whether or not there would be an adequate supply of teachers. So we could do that in stages. Going forward, I hope we will be able to move up to 0.2%. And for the salary scale for kindergarten teachers, I think we should explore that as soon as possible. This time, you are proposing to create the post of the coordinator for special education. But I think this post should be the post for a senior teacher. And in the main, as far as inclusive education is concerned, you cannot just rely on creating this SENCO post. You must provide for professional backup. You have to provide the relevant facilities and equipment and training for the school. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of inclusive education. Another point is that the associate degrees and also the problems facing the 8 universities. The problem we now face is the question of imbalance, and the subvention proposed this time has a leading function, but you are covering up the you have not addressed the question of the different roles played by the different institutions. You said there will be a review soon, but this time we're already seeing the differences. There are many problems facing in tertiary education which is not being addressed or resolved yet. And that is why a lot of disputes and disagreements have arisen, and the Bureau will need to address that. Going forward, we still have the remaining $1.4 billion, and I'd like to suggest that we should convert all the certificate master's post to graduate master post. Mrs. Carrie Lam, during her election campaign, has promised to do this. So I think this is an easier task which could be accomplished earlier. Secretary, would you like to respond? I'll be brief. Mr. Yip has pointed out the problems now facing the education profession, and we agree. But the solution, we may need to discuss how we may resolve those problems. But Mr. Yip has pointed out that these are the problems, and we admit that these are the problems facing the 8 universities. Mr. Yip said that our education expenditures is dropping. He is only talking about the proportion, but as for the actual amount of expenses incurred on education, that number has been steadily increasing.